Okay, well, I think the live stream has started, so I'm going to start the meeting as near to time as possible. Let's start with apologies for absence.
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillors Joe Watkins, Sheila Woodhouse and Reverend Malcolm Lane.
Could I just go through who's here who are not council members of the committee? I know we've got Mr. Wathen from Internal Audit, we've got Mrs. Robson and Mr. Howcroft from Finance. Mrs. Bernard is clerking the meeting. We've got Peter Davis at the front there and Tracy Harry, both officers of the council, at the back. And from the Welsh Audit Office, who do we have?
We've got Terry Lewis from the Wales Audit Office, Audit Manager.
And I'm Marie Harkin. I'm the Engagement Director and Financial Audit Engagement Lead.
Right. Thank you very much. Next formal item on the agenda is declarations of interest. As usual, happy to take them as we go along, but if anybody's got anything they want to say now, that's fine. Also, a formal item on the agenda, the public open forum. There are no members of the public present so far as I can see. So let's go on to the minutes of the previous meeting, the one which was held on the 6th of July 2017. Does anyone have any comments or observations on the minutes?
I'm prepared to move them, Chairman.
I'll second it.
Okay, if there are no further comments or observations, we'll accept the minutes as a true record. So we're going to go on now and look at the action list from the last meeting. Now, the first item on the action list is about the outstanding information about the business plan from the youth service. Do we have anything on that?
Thank you, Chair. I think as discussed in the pre-meeting that we had yesterday, I've subsequently followed up and had a discussion with the Deputy Chief Exec, and in the absence of the Head of Community Learning, Head of Tourism, Leisure, Culture and Youth, so just taking the two actions together, because both are relating to the youth service, the specific asset referenced there, the zone and the grant that's attached to that. So if I just take specifically the point around the zone and the grant, I've had confirmation that there will not be any clawback arrangements with the grant. The asset will be held either in as we go through and secure a decision through council now in the next couple of months around the ADM, and as to whether we retain these services in-house or actually they move out. In either one of those circumstances, that asset will be held by the authority. So just to confirm to members that there isn't any issue there. I think falling back then to the substantive action, which is the first one with regards to the business plan. The business plan for the youth service will be contained within the report that comes forward for the ADM when it's brought in front of members now in the next couple of months.
Well, thank you very much for that. Are members broadly satisfied? Councillor Easton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I brought this to this committee and I'm satisfied with the responses we got. I was concerned what was going to happen with that 70 grand grant, but yes, I'm satisfied with the situation. Thank you.
Can I just check, are we still expecting to see the business plan from the youth service at some point?
Sorry, as I just confirmed, that will be contained within the wider business plan that's brought forward for the ADM, and obviously the services that are contained and are within scope as part of the ADM. The youth service is one of those services that is within scope, and so the business plan for that will be contained within the wider business plan.
And just for my information, ADM is?
The alternative delivery model, and that alternative delivery model will be, a repurposed offer for those services that are within scope, notably tourism, leisure and culture, and the youth offer, those being the services within scope. They will be repurposed into an alternative delivery model, whether contained within the authority or outside of the authority, a decision yet to be made by members at council in the next couple of months.
Yes, Councillor Easton.
Just one question. You said when the business plan is finalised, well, we're coming up to the level of the ADM shortly. Is there a business plan? When will it be presented, and is it linked to the Audit Committee in any shape or form?
I guess as to whether it's linked to the Audit Committee or whether the Audit Committee want to have an interest, I guess that's down to the Chair and the Committee. But just to provide some clarification in terms of the direction of travel. So the intention is that, I guess, beyond the full business case and the business plan being brought in front of Cabinet, I guess in an informal setting, there will be a member seminar and then a full council meeting, which is currently scheduled for the 9th of November.
But surely, Peter, that it's going to Cabinet on the 1st of November. We've got 8 days to have a seminar between that and the 9th of November. Will there be a seminar before the 1st of November, before Cabinet? Timescale is very tight there.
Just to clarify, I think the intention is to actually, I don't think there is a requirement for the report to come up and through Cabinet formally. It can go straight into Council, but obviously in order to ensure that members, and given obviously we have a new administration with a lot of new members, I think it's important that we obviously have a member seminar to bring all members up to a suitable point of understanding with regard to the proposals that are being brought forward and in front of Council on the 9th of November. So just in terms of timescales, obviously members will be afforded that time through the member seminar and before they get into Council.
So through the Chair, will the Audit Committee have sight of this? Where do the pieces fit in?
Again, as I said, it's down to, I guess, the committee and the Audit Committee Chair to determine as to whether they want to engage in whatever capacity in the reports that are being brought in front of Council.
I'm getting the flavour of this as the issue of the business plan with the youth service is now tied up in a much bigger thing to do with the alternative delivery model, and that is being presented to councillors and so on through the appropriate means, and therefore isn't a specific item for the Audit Committee at this particular point. So I'm prepared to let it go as far as the Audit Committee is concerned.
The only other point to make, really, and I guess for the benefit of any, I guess, new members present here today, I know that the ADM has been dealt with as part of the member induction. There has been specific member seminars that have been arranged over recent months, but that comes off the back of, I guess, significant engagement with members as we've brought the ADM through the business case process, both in development of the outline business case and now taking us towards a full business case being brought in front of Council.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Smith.
Comment that I would not consider that I've had significant input. I certainly have been to the two presentations on the alternative delivery model. I would want a whole lot more information, but I appreciate it's not within the remit of this committee, but members certainly been.
Well, as I say, in future, if any members of the Audit Committee do have a specific concern about any of this business, really, you can ask us to raise it as an item in this committee. But I'm happy to let it go for the moment. So thank you very much for that. The next item is concerning internal audits look at the risks around events. Now, it does say on the action point that there's going to be a report at this meeting, but I think this is more something in progress, is it not, Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is on the back of some work that Internal Audit undertook back last year on the events programme, and we were tasked with doing a follow-up review and reporting back in September. We're currently in the throes of doing that follow-up review, and we're working with senior management to provide us with the appropriate information so we can report back to you in a fuller sense in October. So that's what we'll be doing, Chairman, if everybody's happy, is reporting back in October with a more up-to-date report of where we are in terms of events.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smith.
Will that also include the Velothon, finances and such like, profits or whatever?
Short answer is no. What we've okay, Chairman, we did a review of events, and we had a scope of what we were going to cover. That was early in 16-17. That didn't include the the Velathon as part of that process. This secondary report is a follow-up of that first one. So we're just making sure that all the recommendations we made in the first report have been implemented moving forward, and that relates to those events at that particular time, which did not include the Velathon.
Since there seems to be some interest in the Velathon, is that something you're going to be looking at in the future?
It may be worthwhile pointing out that the council meeting on Thursday actually has a substantive item going to it on the Velathon, which includes a debrief, a summary, and an action plan.
I think that's helpful to know that. Okay, thank you. Also for internal audit, the next item, implementation of Audit Committee recommendations. Now, we had some queries, I think, about what the Chief Officer in Children and Young Persons was, why they were not implementing some measures that had been recommended by internal audit. Do you have any more information on that?
Thank you, Chairman. No further information yet. My apologies to the members. I haven't had a chance to catch up with the Chief Officer yet, the relevant Chief Officer, on the back of our previous audit report about implementation of audit recommendations. What you'll find is on a quarterly basis, I'll be reporting to you how well recommendations have been implemented, how well recommendations have been agreed by operational managers. The crux of the matter is to implement those recommendations to ensure improvements to the services provided. I'll make sure that I have that conversation with the Chief Officer by the next time we meet and can report back accordingly, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item on the list of actions about unsatisfactory audit opinions, again for internal audit. This was just really information that there was going to be a report at some stage within 6 months. So I don't think we're expecting anything today. Is that right?
That's right, Chairman. This is a 6-monthly report I present to Audit Committee. Gives you a bit more of a flavour of how we've arrived at our opinions, our unfavourable opinions, and that's on a 6-monthly cycle. The next report is due to be presented in January, Chairman.
Thank you. The next item on the action list is 0 hours contracts. Now, I think this has been dealt with as far as this committee is concerned, and I don't see this as being an outstanding issue for us. So, yes, Mrs. Harry.
I can also confirm, Chair, that the information regarding gender breakdown has also been provided to Council as well.
Thank you for that. The item on the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, the link to the guides was sent out on the 21st of July, so that was the action completed. So thanks for that. When I was looking at the minutes of the previous meeting, I noticed a couple of things which I wondered what might be actions for us. One was about really councillors' training about understanding treasury management. We were going to have a session from Arling Close, our financial advisors, and also as part of that recommended self-assessment of our skills in that area. Now that's not on the agenda today, but I believe Mr. Howcroft has some information on that.
Yes, Chair. If you remember before we broke up for the summer there, I actually shared with you the self-assessment form for members to take away and have a look at over the summer period. It was my intention to do that during this meeting, but at the time I'd actually forgot that also coincided with having the statement of accounts brought to this meeting, which meant that the agenda was fairly heavy. So I've actually pushed everything back by a month, if that's okay with the committee.
Yes, it's okay with me, but October's beginning to look quite weighty as well, but I'm sure it'll be enjoyable. Could you recirculate the self-assessment before the next meeting so that people have a chance to look at it again?
I will do, Chair. There's a couple of aspects around the Prudential Code at the moment which are in the business of being firmed up. It actually won't be a problem if you decide to defer it for a further 4 weeks, because we will be able to give you a more informed opinion on what the future of Treasury within local authorities might look like. So I will prepare it for the October meeting, but if it falls into November because your work plan is is too exacting, then it's not a problem from my perspective.
Well, we haven't seen the final agenda for October yet, so let's leave it on the schedule. I don't like things to be postponed again and again, if possible. Okay, good. I think then I can now move on to the next item on the agenda. We actually have two items on the agenda now. We've got the statement of accounts, which is item 6, and the ISO 260 response to the statement of accounts, which is item number 7. I'm going to take these two together because things raised in the first paper are addressed in the second one. So I'm going to ask Mr. Howcroft to introduce the statement of accounts, and then I'm going to ask for a Welsh Audit Office response, taking into account their paper, and then I'll throw it open for discussion. So over to you, Mr. Howcroft.
Yeah, the covering report actually captures a lot of context to this, in that what is normally required by audit committees to take a view on the final accounts and actually recommend them or otherwise to the next council meeting, which will be on Thursday. I also, in that covering report, explained some of the context around the need over the next 4 years to take effectively a month out of our process. We currently allow for 3 months worth of preparation. That will go down to 2 months. We're already 3 weeks into that, and we have to find another week over the next 4 years. So things are looking good that from an authority's point of view, the preparation of accounts will meet that revised deadline. It is quite a technical document as a statement of accounts, and does have a number of pages to it. There are some changes to the code of practice this year that you'll note in the ISA 260 that we haven't adjusted, and hopefully as a change to the previous approach, we've been asked in a letter of representation to explain to members why we've chosen not to make those adjustments. What I would say is that the main emphasis around that is that the accounts still provide a true and fair view to the council, and that actually adjusting those records, given the time involved to do that through that process, was thought to be counterproductive. On that score, I'm happy to take any queries you might have on the final statement of accounts subsequent to audit, and you'll appreciate that this is a latest incarnation of the document from one that you saw prior to the summer break in July.
Thank you, Mr. Howcroft. I will just turn it over to Welsh Audit Office now to introduce their part of the two papers.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this report then, the ISA 260 report, sets out the results of our audit of the financial statements for the year ended March 2017. The format of the report is actually specified by auditing standards, and there are certain issues that we're required to report to you in putting the report together. As we say in the report, in terms of where we are, well, the audit is now substantially complete. When I say substantially complete, I just still have to now complete my final review of the work that the team have carried out. It's most unlikely, although not unheard of completely, that anything would come out at that stage. But just to flag with you that it is substantially complete. And as Mark has already said, the audit has gone exceptionally well. We're very, very grateful for the support that we've had from Joy, from Mark and the rest of the finance team. I mean, I think it's great that they've managed to take 3 weeks out of the process this year. As we say in paragraph 7 there, we actually received the accounts, the draft accounts, sort of 21 days ahead of the agreed deadline. So that bodes very well actually for the need to take the month out of the process going forward. And we'll continue to work with the finance team to ensure that we do make that deadline as we move forward. So in terms then of the results of the work, well, as we say there in paragraph 9, it's the Auditor General's intention to issue an unqualified audit report on the financial statements once you've provided us with the letter of representation, which is included at Appendix 1. As you would expect, there are some uncorrected misstatements, and as Mark has already said, the reason for them remaining uncorrected is ultimately for the council, and the reasons are set out in the letter of representation. I wasn't planning to talk you through the detail of those uncorrected misstatements. What I can really do is echo what Mark has already said, in that they do not detract from us being able to issue an unqualified audit report on the financial statements. There are also misstatements that have been corrected by management and which we are required to bring to your attention, and those are set out with explanations in Appendix 3 to the report. Other significant issues arising from the audit, we've identified there in the first couple of bullet points really. Some aspects of the financial reporting and accounting practices that we believe would be beneficial if you were to address those. There are a large number of rounding errors in the financial statements, as I'm sure you will have seen from your own review of them. As we would do, we have recommended that those are adjusted for. However, the Council has decided not to do that this year. Having had discussions with the finance team, I think this will not be an issue going forward, because I understand they're proposing to use rounding formulas in the preparation of next year's accounts. But what it does mean is that there are rounding errors, and quite a number of those in this year's financial statements. Again, nothing that would stop us from issuing an unqualified audit report, but I do need to bring it to your attention. And then also we have recommended there in sort of bullet point B that it might be beneficial for the council to use the SIPFA disclosure checklist in preparing the accounts to ensure compliance with the code that you have to adhere to in preparing the accounts. We didn't encounter any significant difficulties during the audit. No significant matters discussed and corresponded upon with management which we need to report to. No other matters significant to the oversight of the financial reporting process. Didn't identify any material weaknesses in your internal controls. And there are no other matters that I have to bring to your attention as those charged with governance. Finally then, really, just to state that we have complied with ethical standards in undertaking the work, and in our professional judgment, we're independent and our objectivity has not been compromised in any way. But very happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I'll just remind ourselves what the task is today, that the final draft of Monmouthshire's County Council Statement of Accounts be reviewed in conjunction with the auditor's feedback and endorsed to full council. So that's what we're aiming to do today. So any questions or observations? Councillor Feakins.
Thanks. So are we taking it then that the, for argument's sake, in F, where the discounted cash flow of Morrison's lease hasn't been accounted for, has been accounted for incorrectly, as £1 million, will that not be reflected in the accounts, or it has been reflected in the accounts?
It's currently reflected in the accounts as a deferred capital receipt. The auditor suggests that because that is being paid over 25 years, effectively there is an implied interest rate attached to that, and they would prefer to have seen that as £3 million capital receipt and £1 million worth of interest that the council would have received. To all intents and purposes, from a cash perspective, the council will still receive £4 million. It has no effect on the bottom line of the accounts. We're still not, well, as I described there, we still don't necessarily accept that position, but I think pragmatically, if that is going to be a standing item in the future, in the accounts over the next 25 years, we'd be sensible to actually amend that irrespective.
Thanks. And which I appreciate. So is that as a flatline figure, that £4 million? It's 160 grand a year for 25 years?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And does it have any implication for us regarding sort of external funding by knocking ourselves by £1 million? Does that have any impact?
It will mean that what I will have to do is convert a revenue stream in terms of being able to utilise it for capital purposes that if it was straight a capital receipt I wouldn't need to do. It's not too problematic to do that. I ought to explain to those new members here the arrangement that was agreed with Morrison involved a payment up front of 13.75 million and then a remainder of 4 million over the remaining 25 years. I wouldn't want to leave you with the opinion that the Morrison development has only realised £4 million to the council.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you. it's this question reads to the audit from the, rather than, well, one of you will answer this. It's regarding school balances. I read the report, but I don't seem to pick anything up in there that you see a risk in the council's position with school balances. In the previous financial year, at the end of the year, there were 6 schools in a deficit balance, but at the end of the year, there were nearly 28 or maybe 29 running a deficit balance. It's estimated, I think, that there could be further erosion into deficit balances by the end of this year, but there are a block of schools with a fairly substantial surplus. Did you pick any risk up, as from the audit perspective, regarding the future of school balances within Monmouthshire and the sustainability of schools being managed the way they appear to be at the moment?
So your question is directed to the Welsh Audit Office, is that right? Okay, well, whoever wants to respond to that.
I think the auditors will remind you that their evaluation of the accounts is on a true and fair view of the accounting entries. So to all intents and purposes, what they would look at in terms of looking at the school's balances is whether those are accurate and actually reported correctly. They may very well look at our procedures and processes through their consideration of the annual governance statement and what our reaction is to that. But obviously most members will be aware of the position about the school balances reserves through the periodic monitoring information that you receive.
Yeah, I understand all that, but I just wondering whether the audit feel that we are running a risk with our position with the schools, and yourself, next year is likely to be £600,000 in deficit from where we are, total schools, from where we are at the moment of, I think, about £250,000 in surplus. But it's the concern really is there's 9 or 10 schools with a considerable surplus, and it's going to throw a problem to the schools which are actually running deficit at the moment. What is the solution? I thought the audit, Wales Audit would have found a risk to the council on that, but obviously you're looking at it in a different light than what I was thinking of.
Certainly the focus of the work that we've been undertaking over the past couple of months has been, as Mark has said, on the accounting, and in this case here, how to account really for schools on or off balance sheet. I think, though, that I don't know if there's any plans from a performance audit perspective to look at schools or anything like that. So no, so it's not something we would specifically do as financial auditors.
Maybe I could. Cabinet have received a report about school balances and what they need to do and put in place to take some actions to make the position improved for next year. So Cabinet have received that report. I think it went to Select Committee as well, Children and Young People Select Committee, so they're looking at the case as well. So in terms of governance and your role in ensuring that some action is being taken, I can report that some reports have been through the proper processes. It's now monitoring whether those actions actually deliver the result that we require.
Yes, I saw there was an item on the Cabinet agenda, but this has gone to CYP. I obviously missed that because I'm not on the CYP. Okay, thank you.
And that report would be available to councillors?
Yes, it's a public document.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. Any other comments and observations on the package? Yes, Councillor Smith.
Chairman, if I may. I'm on a steep learning curve here. Looking at the risks, the Council's strategic risk assessment, it's only a comment, it isn't a question, because I love the last column which says the risk level post-mitigation. And what I've written alongside is just what? Because I'm quite intrigued as I run down that list that you can move from medium to low post-mitigation, high to medium post-mitigation, but there's no indication of what the mitigation is. And I know you can't tell me. It's I just think perhaps we're being a little optimistic with some of the moves to medium. There's only one that's a high one, which is the capital budget for the 21st century schools. That moves from high to medium, and aware of whatever in the borrowings. But that was my feeling. Regarding the report as a whole, I thank officers for it. I found it most interesting, and because I'm a member of your committee now, I've had to read it rather more thoroughly. There are a lot of questions, and I'd appreciate sort of after the meeting, some time actually talking to an officer who could look at all my scribbles going through and clarify for me. Okay, thank you.
Could that be arranged for Councillor Smith? Yes? I think we've had a nod from. I think we've had a nod from.
Just in terms of the risk assessment, that's in the annual governance statement at the beginning of the accounts. That's where you've picked it up. I mean, the table in there is just a condensed version of our actual strategic authority risk assessment, where those actions and the mitigation actions are recorded. And I think that report comes through Audit Committee at periodic intervals as well, anyway, for you to have a look at. So perhaps you can pick it up there.
Well, you said pretty much what I was going to chip in. Really, the whole issue of risks and mitigations of which does come up to the committee from time to time, and that's when we'd consider it in detail. I think that's really all we need to say at this point. Yeah, thank you. Any other observations or comments on the papers? Right. Well, if there's nothing else, then I'd just like it to be recorded that we endorse these reports to full council. So thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the review of the reserves for Q1, which I think is a matter for Mr. Howcroft. Oh, sorry, review of reserves. Oh, I've missed that one out, have I? Oh, sorry. Apologies, I need a new pair of spectacles. Right, the next item on the agenda, start again, is the internal audit progress report for 2017-18 Q1. Mr. Wathen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is one of the regular reports that come to Audit Committee. It's a quarterly report, and this one is in relation to Q1 of the financial year 17-18. It's twofold. It does provide normally a list of audit opinions from the audit work we've undertaken, and also the performance of the internal audit team. As this is Q1, although the work is progressing against the plan, which has been agreed by Audit Committee, we haven't yet issued any audit opinions, either in final or in draft. So that information won't be available this time round, Chairman, but there is a list of work that we've undertaken to date against the audit plan in the appendix, and that is what we would call non-opinion work. So we've progressed, we've been involved with financial advice, we've been involved with the compilation of the annual governance statement, we've been involved with some grant claims, which have got deadlines for certification, and we've been finalising audit work, which was would have been draft as at the end of the last financial year, so 16-17 work in Q1. And those opinions, if they were presented in draft at the end of 16-17, would have been presented to Audit Committee in the annual report in May. So we just need to make sure we comply with the public sector internal audit standards, and we'll get an external assessment in relation to that to give you assurance that we are compliant and we are delivering a professional audit service, and that will be undertaken by April 2018. In terms of the work we've done and performance of the team, we've achieved about 13% of our audit plan, which is in line of where we were in this time last year, 16-17. We've issued audit reports, both in draft and in final, taking us around about 8 days to get a draft report out to service managers and 17 days to finalise that, based on the comments we receive to agree our recommendations and for managers to implement those to make improvements, as I mentioned earlier on. So things are progressing reasonably well. No major issues to report in Q1. Happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Thank you. I just note that we are to note the report. That's what we're here for. Councillor Higginson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. In appreciation of what you just said, you said, I picked up an area, you started the year with a full complement of staff. Is there any significance in that statement? Has it been reduced since?
Yes, over the last few years we've struggled to maintain the full complement of staff, which has had an impact on our ability to deliver the audit plan. 16-17, we were quite lucky and maintained the staff we had on board, and we achieved 75% of our audit plan in terms of coverage, so hopefully giving you more assurance on the adequacy of the internal control environment, the governance arrangements and risk across the whole council. The more staff we have on board, the more assurance we can give to members and to senior management. So to have a full complement is a good start for the year.
Yeah, if I can come back, the reason I asked that question is because, I mean, there are four, I think it's four, I picked up special audits, if I put it that way. So, you know, that's work that you know that comes up, and it's not in your normal plan. It just happens to arise as and when, and it can cause you a lot of time to be spent on it, on these various reviews or whatever. So I did. That's the reason I asked you. So you're quite happy with the staffing complement, I take it.
Yeah, that would be nice. Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, with special investigations, we do plan for some time during the year for special investigations, but as you say, they're unpredictable, so we never know when they're going to occur and how long they're going to take to come to fruition and to complete. But we will work with our audit plan alongside the specials, and what we've done in Q1 in particular is engage the services of a former chief auditor to undertake one of the specials specifically for us.
Right, do we have any other comments or observations on the internal audit progress report? If not, then I suggest we note the report. So thank you very much. The next item on the agenda, the paper is actually entitled 2017-18 Reserve Uses Forecast, and I think this is for Mr. Howcroft.
Thank you, Chair. If I could direct members to paragraph 2.1, which is kind of the context as to why the Audit Committee gets this periodic information. Much of the information included in the report, most members will recognise as being a direct lift from the quarterly monitoring report. But in essence, the reason why it's been brought here into focus is the level of reserve usage that is such that we're actually using our earmarked reserves up faster than we're actually being able to replenish them. It's not a problem particularly because the earmarked reserves are, for those of you that undertook the induction training, earmarked reserves are those that are actually created for a specific purpose. So if you haven't got a specific purpose, you don't actually need to hold an earmarked reserve. However, there are a number of reserves that play to our ability to re-engineer and redesign services around investor save, priority investment, and actually it's useful to keep on members' radar just how much and at what level they are declining. I ought to also add, it came up during the Chair's briefing session that we do set a financial planning assumption that our council fund levels should be between 4 and 6% of our net expenditure. You need to exclude earmarked reserves from that calculation because what we're looking at is the contingency that the council holds to deal with an unknown event. And you wouldn't normally use your earmarked reserves for that. You would look to focus on your council fund. I'm pleased to be able to report that actually on the level of declining net expenditure, actually the level of reserves we're holding is actually increasing slightly, so that at the moment it stands at just over 5%, which is halfway between that 4 and 6% level. Some of the context of this is that other authorities are holding far bigger balances and reserves than the council. I would certainly like our earmarked reserves to be a higher level than they actually are, but Welsh Government remind all 22 authorities in Wales that actually during this period of austerity, authorities should not be sat on excessive balances, and I don't think 5% level of the council fund is particularly excessive, although I draw your attention to the speed that the earmarked reserves are being used up, particularly those that are involved in re-engineering and redesign of services. At that point, I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, questions and observations. Councillor Feekins.
Two questions, if I may, then. Firstly, for me, using earmarked reserves quicker than anticipated isn't necessarily an issue because they're earmarked for a purpose and we're using them for that purpose. What would become an issue if we're using earmarked reserve for a different purpose other than what they was earmarked for? which I don't believe is the case. If I can just have that clarified very quickly.
It's not, but some of the purposes are quite general in nature, things like investor redesign. I mean, we had an £884,000 surplus last year under Joy's tutelage. We actually replenished some of the more usual reserves that are under a great deal of strain, things like the redundancy reserve, the investor redesign reserve. But generally, the annual draw on those is more sufficient than actually the replenishment, so there is a downward trend on them.
And another question?
Okay, thank you. Regarding the surplus or any sort of surplus of budget that we hold, any reserves that we hold, do we use those to offset borrowing, such as the schools programme or whatever, or is that a separate? Do you have to hold them as cash, or can you reinvest those, or can you offset borrowing?
Yeah, you can actually offset them in borrowing. The term we often use is internal borrowing. So we will obviously look at our cash balances, our reserves balances before we decide whether we need to make a formal loan or a borrowing requirement. So our capital financing requirement is of the order of 130 million. We've actually only borrowed of the order of 90 million pounds. So you can understand the level of churn within our accounts.
Councillor Smith.
Can you just clarify for me in my mind? The schools' reserves, their funding, individual schools, some in deficit, some are better suited. That's all regarded as one total fund. So would that be used, or could it be used to balance or assist a school that's in deficit from a school that's in a better situation? Is it a combined fund that really schools don't have complete control over, individual schools?
In past years, there would have been schools in deficit and there would have been schools in surplus. It's only been brought into more focus now that we've actually moved into a collective position, that when you add up the balances of all the schools, they are now collectively in a deficit position, which is what necessitated that report to Cabinet recently in terms of saying this is an unacceptable position to the Council that involves some remedial action over this next 12 months.
So it's a fluid situation.
It will be a fluid situation, as is the council fund balance at any point in time. I mean, this reflects the first period's monitoring, but I will have to update it for month 7's monitoring, which would obviously exhibit a different bottom line effect.
Because if that's the case, there's always an incentive for schools to behave in a different way and ensure they don't carry any plus.
No, it's not the way I would normally advocate they think about reserves. They should think about reserves in the same fashion that the council is holding the council fund, in that these things should be regarded as their flexibility to absorb any volatility. What I'm finding increasingly is that schools are dipping into the same amount every year and actually using it as part of their core funding.
David May, Chairman, under 2.1 euro, number 4 bullet point. It's a bit sad.
Well, unfortunately, that is the reality at the moment. I mean, our settlements are generally probably one of the worst of the 22 authorities in Wales. We have to find of the order about £5 million annual revenue savings a year. That increasingly involves us looking at redesigning and re-engineering services, which is where the emphasis of accommodating some of that pressure and the use of earmark reserves is felt.
And the comment, lack of clarity on the authority's part.
Okay, do we have any further questions or observations about the use of reserves paper? Yes.
Just regarding the earmark reserves, are you comfortable in the present situation, or would you prefer to solidify or firm up when a reserve is earmarked? So that fund is being used for that purpose. If it's not being used for that purpose, it comes back into general reserves or comes back into the following year's accounts.
We did a review of earmark reserves probably before the new council was elected, so probably 12 or 18 months ago. And at that point in time, we re-looked at what each reserve was supposed to be used for, the protocol around accessing it, what is required by services if they want to request using it, so the business case that they need to put forward. So that was all tightened up at that time. So part of the reason this report comes through to Audit Committee is to make sure that that process is working, and there is a tighter process now to make sure we're using the reserves in the best possible way to make sure that we make the savings that we need in the future.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So we'll note that we've received a report for information and we've commented, and no doubt Finance will be taking those comments away for future consideration. The next item on the agenda is the revised information strategy, which I think the author is Sian Hayward, and I know she can't be here this afternoon. Now, there's two possible candidates who are going to speak to this report for us, either Mr. Davis or Mr. Gatehouse from Policy and Performance. So what have you decided to do between you?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'll just introduce the report with a brief introduction, but I think probably missing out Tracy Harry as well, who accommodates the position of CIRO within the organisation. So as being the senior information risk owner. We've got Tracy here today, as well as Matt from the performance team and Emma from our digital programme office. So each of them have contributed into what we have brought in front of us today. Just by way of short introduction, we are bringing forward a revised and updated information strategy to the committee today for Audit Committee scrutiny. The strategy has undergone a review, and certainly as a result of our feeling as an organisation to extend beyond what the previous strategy focused its efforts on, which was around information governance and legislation compliance. Now, clearly, that will always remain the bedrock of an information strategy. But in terms of where the organisation is looking to move forward, data is seen as, and information is really seen as the lifeblood of the organisation, and in alongside our physical assets, our workforce, our people, etc. It's key to driving a very effective decision making. So to that end, the strategy has been developed further to accommodate, as it says in 3.3, three interrelated strands surrounding, as would be expected, information governance and legislation, but stepping beyond that then in terms of developing robust and sound arrangements around digital information. But furthermore, and in terms of, I guess, where our emergent approach is now, in terms of the extensive use of data, open data and business intelligence, and as I said, in driving our decision making going forward. So I'm not going to talk to the strategy in any great detail. Clearly, I'll take questions from the floor, and again, officers present here today. But just to sort of satisfy members that in terms of the wider governance arrangements and in terms of us ensuring that we deliver against this strategy document and the revised strategy document, we have got, just give me 1 second. We have the information governance group, which is in place, which is chaired by Tracy as CIRO, to oversee delivery against the strategy and obviously matters concerning information governance. The strategy has been put in to cover a 3-year time frame. We are committed to undertaking an annual review of the strategy to ensure that we are making suitable progress. And again, I'll take questions from the floor. I've got colleagues with me again today to respond to any specific questions.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to add anything to the introduction to the paper? No? Okay, well, the recommendation is that we review the information strategy to ensure that it's fit for purpose to safeguard the integrity and security of our data while taking steps to becoming a truly data-led organisation. And I understand the paper next will go to single cabinet member. That's where it's going after this. So in the light of that, can we have any questions or observations, please? Councillor Eason.
Yeah, just one question. It may be unrelated. Regarding data and data protection, as members, we are required to register with the ICO. Are we compliant as members in that course?
Councillor Eason, as far as I'm aware, and I will need to double check, most members we facilitate the registration with the ICO, and I know it's been raised with Annette Evans recently. I can't give you a complete picture at this point in time, but I know many members are registered, but I can find out exactly the position and report back to members of this committee if that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This came up at the training session for licensing, I think, in terms of recommendations. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you for that.
Just
Councillor
a
Higgins.
quick comment on it. I've been absolutely fed up with the letters I've been getting from the ICO regarding my subscription is due for renewal. As soon as I get that, I send it to the members' officers whose names I won't mention. All I hope is that they undertake it. But having said that, it seems I get reminders, and I'm just wondering, how promptly is the fees paid? If you can get, I wonder sometimes is a delay in in doing it.
I can't comment on that because I'm not responsible for payment, but I can certainly find out for you, Councillor.
Yeah, fine, thank you. I mean, if someone's on holiday, well, they can't do it. I appreciate that, but I just wonder.
No doubt important information, that. Councillor Feakins.
Thanks. Just regarding the management of the data and the storage of the data, are we using proprietary software or are we using third-party software? Are we storing stuff in the cloud and that sort of stuff? Is one question in regards to ongoing payments and sort of future payments for us as a council. And then really it's to do, which is part and parcel of that question, I guess, it's to do with the, probably answer that question first, so that's okay.
Hi. We have a different arrangements depending on the service area. So some information will be hosted by SRS, others might be with third-party providers, and they can be in the cloud. We've done a map of all of our systems, and we're working with Tracy's team to make sure that we're GDPR ready by looking at where the information is, how it can be accessed, how it can be deleted, controlled, etc.
Does that sort of give us residual payments to people like Microsoft, for argument's sake, like for their sort of cloud services, or is that what you're telling me? It's all bespoke down to us.
Don't really understand the question. Can you please explain?
Are we having to pay some sort of third-party provider for provision of service, or is it an in-house provision?
It depends on the system. So sometimes we will pay a third-party provider to host the data as well as for the application. So it does depend on the particular service area and the arrangement they've got with a third-party provider.
Any more questions or observations from the floor, please? Yes, Councillor Smith.
When it comes to sort of members, it would be nice if that responsibility could be taken by Monmouthshire County Council for all 43 of us, that we are signed up to whatever, because like Councillor Higginson, I've had reminder letters, but I assume that somebody's dealt with whatever way I have to be registered. But that's sort of a service that I think should be rendered for members. We shouldn't have to be worried by that sort of issue. That's just me.
My only comment on that is because it relates to members working with constituents and information sharing with constituents, that obviously that's their responsibility, and you need to make sure you are registered accordingly in terms of how you are dealing with citizens' information that's being shared with you. So it's whilst it is a responsibility that you have as a councillor, it is down to you individually. It's something that I can check with the Information Commissioner, but that's my understanding as to why you are all written to individually and you have to register individually.
I understand that the new information strategy is moving on beyond data security and issues like that, and is starting to look at data use in the authority. Can somebody give me an example of how that might change as a result of the strategy? Yes, Mr. Gatehouse.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So there's a number of areas. Some of this is in terms of within the strategy, what's termed business insight, ensuring that we make the maximum possible use of data in terms of surfacing some of the issues, challenges and opportunities. So as well as sorts of some of the what you might term sort of narrative information coming back, well, when we do get narrative information, that we're able to say tag it, capture that in terms of themes and so on to make analysis easier than if things are large text documents. So if you take a big strategy, within that there will be core themes. So it's down to things like tagging that and identifying patterns within that in terms of the sorts of issues that it identifies, so others can access it more easily. In terms then of some of the more traditional data, the numbers side of things, it would be using approaches such as open data, so that the data we hold and the data which is not personal information, so it's not the sort of things which would be covered by the general data protection regulation about individuals, where it isn't personal, that we actually undertake to put that out on a website in such a way that it enhances public accountability, but also is published under what's termed an open government license, which basically means that other developers and public bodies can use that and analyse it. And what we aspire to with that is twofold. One, better public accountability, because the default position is if it's not personal data, it's out there and it's open. An example being our spend information. You know, we currently do this already, but every item we spend, every item we purchase costing over £500, we publish. And that's an open data feed. So that means that external bodies can pick that up and analyse it and ensure the openness in our procurement processes. And the other aspect to that is the more of this data we publish, things like location data, it may seem obvious, everyone knows where a leisure centre is, for example, but actually by publishing things like coordinate data for buildings, that enables people out there that build apps and websites to sort of hoover up and use the data on Monmouthshire. And sometimes they can build apps and websites that will add civic value to our population at no cost to ourselves. So the more of this data we publish openly, you know, that can enable local IT firms, developers to potentially capitalise on the opportunity of that, but ultimately in building things which make a difference to the lives of our population over and above that which we're able to do ourselves.
Thank you for that. The scales have fallen from my eyes. I was trying to see what the important issues were on that side. I do have a little bit of a history in this area, which I won't bore everyone with it now, but thank you very much indeed. Are there any other comments or observations? Councillor Feakins.
Is our strategy, are we doing this alone in Wales, or are we mirroring other authorities within Wales? And are we getting support from Welsh Government in order to do this?
There's probably a number of different areas there. If I've got the microphone on, I'll sort of come in on the data aspect. So, for example, the area I just mentioned, open data, we're working as part of the Cardiff Capital Region Group. So I attend a working group which is chaired by the Chief Exec of Torfaen, Alison Ward, and that brings together all 10 local authorities plus the other public bodies in the area to learn and move along, so that really then we get to a position where we can do this on a broader footprint, get the economies of scale from that, but also make it easier for people who are interacting with us to access more information in an accessible way. And I know, Tracy.
And I think my comments would be that in terms of the compliance agenda, that's consistent across Wales. We all need to comply to the same regulations. We've now got the new General Data Protection Regulations, which we all have to comply with by May 2018, which has got significant implications for all authorities across England and Wales. So we all have to comply with that. So that would be consistent. In terms of our approach to using data, I think that's unique to Monmouthshire. Some other authorities may be at different points, and and similarly our digital programme again will be unique to Monmouthshire, but clearly digitalisation will be used across Wales at different points, at different veins, but the strategy is unique to us.
Thank you. Yes, Mr Davis.
Just one final point, really, just to add to the comments other officers made, really, and I guess just offering a reflection. I go back to Councillor Smith's point of a few minutes back on a previous agenda item in terms of some of the significant challenges clearly our organisation is facing going forward in dealing with the challenges around the medium-term financial plan, the significant financial challenges, and obviously the wider challenges in terms of our demographic and etc. The list goes on. Clearly, and in terms of, repositioning our current operating model into one that is obviously sustainable going forward, clearly our decisions need to be driven by, they need to be data-led. So, they need to be clearly evidence-based, because we are going to have to make some very difficult decisions, and the future will be very much around choices. Certainly for members, and some of the tough decisions that need to be made. So clearly, we're looking, as an organisation, to enhance, the skill sets within the organisation in terms of, what one might describe as the level of data and information maturity of our colleagues, and ensuring that our systems equally support that, so that we have the data that we need to make the right decisions. Some of that will require us to develop systems, the information that are contained within systems, so that when we are having to make some of these difficult decisions, difficult policy decisions, they are driven by and supported by the right and the accurate data.
Sorry, if there aren't any further comments or observations, we'll just note then that we've reviewed the information strategy, and that will now go to the appropriate cabinet member. Right, well, the next item on the agenda is the annual improvement report, which is a Wales Audit Office report. I understand that this is more of a summary of reports previously supplied with responses from Monmouthshire County Council. So I'd like to invite the Wales Audit Office to introduce the paper, please. I believe that's Non Jenkins at the front there.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, it is very much a summary of the work that we under the regulators and inspectors have undertaken over the last year. You have these every year, every council has them every year. We are duty bound to prepare annual improvement reports and publish them. So we have published this already as in August. So what you have in front of you is, and we are also sort of duty bound to provide you with a kind of overall statement of how likely you are to meet the statutory requirements. And this year, based on the work that we have undertaken, we have come to the conclusion that the council is likely to meet its statutory requirements in relation to continuous improvement, providing it responds constructively and in a timely way to our statutory recommendations, which are highlighted, again summarised in the report. As is the headline conclusions and proposals for improvement that we've undertaken and given to the authority throughout the year. So the status of statutory recommendations are higher in terms of escalation than proposals for improvement, and they relate to those to that particular report that we have already presented to you in relation to safeguarding arrangements of curb craps scheme. So you will, as well as the work that we have undertaken here in Monmouthshire, which you'll see on pages up until 11 or 12 of my report, you will also have the summary annual audit letter from last year. with your financial audit information and in that, and also a summary in Appendix 3 of the national reports that we have done and the recommendations that have come out of those in relation to local government. And that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to invite MCC to make a response. Is that going to be Mr. Gatehouse?
Yes, thank you, Mr. White. I guess the content of this report, as Non has referred to, or the detail, is something which, for the most part, the committee has seen the detail of. These reports have been brought individually as published through to the committee, alongside how the council has responded to the proposals for improvement in terms of the actions we've put in place. And then to give members assurance of how we're progressing those issues, you're reminded that twice a year, usually midsummer and November, December time, we bring an overview of our progress against those proposals for improvement. So the last of those reports was brought to this committee, I think, on the 6th of July, and that covered all of the activity within this report, and is summarised here. And again, we'll continue to go through this, and we have more audit work that is coming through within the 17-18 audit year, and there will be some new reports coming through to committees later on this year, and at that point we'll prepare further responses to that. But as things stand, it's my view that as officers we're bringing forward at an appropriate time an overview of how we're dealing with these proposals to committee, and you're having the opportunity then to consider those as part of your role for overseeing the effectiveness of our improvement arrangements. But if there are specifics within this report that people would like to sort of ask questions on, then I'm happy to sort of come back and look at the detail and bring that out in discussion today.
Yeah, can I just ask what happens to this report now? Is it formally going to be presented to council, or is it a matter of publication, or what is it?
From our perspective, it's been published in August, so it's on our website. It's available to the public. I'm not sure whether the council is going to be taking it to full council or not.
Sorry. With this report, we take through the summary of the Auditor General's letter, but this is a matter of sort of public record, and in terms of the individual items that make it up, they go through as appropriate, so to the relevant committees and decision-making bodies. But in a sense, because this is summarising everything that's happened before, it's not something we take through in its entirety as a council report.
And I believe you've already responded to any recommendations made and reported back on that.
That's right, yes.
Okay, I'll throw it open to questions and observations. Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. It's in your view, Wales Audit, that you felt that our constitution was not up to date at that particular time, and reviewing that, it was basically around the fact that the council's senior leadership team and select committees were not kept up to date. Now, they are fluid situation. That is a fluid situation, can change at any time. How soon would you expect the council to update its constitution based on nominal changes like that? Because, or would that be an addendum to the constitution as they change?
Yeah, I think we had this discussion at the last meeting in terms of the constitution and reviewing the constitution, and our view is that it should be always kept up to date. It should be a live document, because schemes of delegation are based on it, so you need to know as members who are making specific decisions, especially if that changes. So to make sure that accountabilities are clear, it should be kept live.
Okay, perhaps Mr. Gatehouse will make a comment on his view of how he makes that live at any one particular time. Would it be on the web? Would it be one particular document? Would it be the master document? Because there would be documents floating out which would be out of date, which could be construed to be not valid.
Well, in terms of live, there are some documents as a council we keep properly live, as soon as something changes, we change the version on the hub. So, for an example, would be our risk log that you oversee. As soon as new intelligence comes to light, we add it to that. Because the council constitution is something which any amendments to must be endorsed by council, it's something which is overseen by Rob Tranter as the monitoring officer, and any changes brought forward. I think the recommendation made at this particular time was around more than sort of changes in membership of committee, but actually relating to how the senior management team and the scheme of delegation was set out. So it was perhaps a more substantial revision that was a little bit out of date than perhaps some of the individual member issues, where perhaps you wouldn't expect it to come back to council every time when a committee membership changes. Really what's set out then is the purpose and function of the committee and the role of the committee rather than the individual membership. I think where structures and senior management arrangements change, that's where it's very important that we do keep that constitution up to date and bring it back, because the scheme of delegation sort of flows from members into senior officers.
Thank you from me. I'm going to go to Councillor Higginson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The one I got is regarding the curb craft scheme. Excuse me. There are 3 recommendations made, and yet there were no proposals for improvement. So I wonder if any of our officers could enlighten me as to where we are with that. Is it still in that situation, or the moves being made to do something about the curb craft scheme?
Do we have anything on that, Mr. Gatehouse?
Yeah, if I can just pick that up. So just to reflect back on the point that Non made earlier, what we've got with is a sort of sliding scale in terms of severity of recommendations through to, I suppose the worst point for us, recommendation of ministerial intervention, which would be the most serious. The least serious being a proposal for improvement, which is when Wales Audit Office make what is in effect, I suppose, a less serious recommendation than a statutory one. So a statutory recommendation, such as happened with Curbcraft, we have a responsibility to respond within 30 days. Proposals for improvement, I suppose, are more advisory in their nature. It's important to us that we follow up and act on them and learn from those, but they don't have the severity. So our 3 Curbcraft recommendations were statutory ones. And because of the nature of those, whereas most of the proposals for improvement are overseen by Audit Committee, it was felt that that issue warranted attention from all members, and so it was taken to full council, and council itself has examined those recommendations and the action that flowed from them. So we are taking action in response to them. Just to sort of emphasise there, that's a very serious issue, something which we take very seriously and take responsibility for. And just to emphasise, it was a case of an issue of systems rather than, in this particular instance, children coming to harm, but children were placed in risk because of the system. So it's an issue that's being dealt with and followed up and has been reported through to all members at council.
I'm happy that the Curbcraft issue was dealt with by full council. I did wonder why it wasn't one of the things that we'd seen before. I don't think it had been put to the committee for information. So I just wonder whether officers might consider making sure that everything does at least get reported to the Audit Committee for information. I've got a couple of hands up here. I'll go to Mr. Watson.
Thanks, Chairman. In relation to the specific recommendations for Curbcraft, there was a preliminary internal review undertaken within this service area itself, and a secondary review is now being undertaken by my team, so internal audit are involved. We're going through those recommendations and following it's a live piece of work for us, so when we conclude that, recommendations will be made and actions taken accordingly.
Mr. Davis, do you have anything you want to add? No. Okay.
Could I ask when
Yes.
you expect that to come out, please, to be presented to members?
Ordinarily, our report won't come back to Audit Committee. It will go back through to senior management to address those weaknesses and issues raised in the external audit report. And I guess through senior management, they'll report back to members accordingly to give you assurances that those issues have been addressed properly.
Councillor Feekins.
Thank you, Chair. Are we as MCC confident that we are going to respond to all of the recommendations, including the advisories, and are we adequately resourced to do so?
I guess that's for you, is it not, Mr. Gatehouse?
Yes. Certainly, everything that comes to us in one of these reports is of interest to us. It wouldn't be raised if there wasn't some evidence to think there's an issue there that we need to consider. Some of those issues will resonate more with us than others. However, all of them are points for learning, and every one of them will be brought back to committee with our response to it. And you see to us within those responses the degree of energy and resource that's required to sometimes make those changes. And hopefully what you will see as members over time is changes in response to some of those issues. So yeah, they are all taken seriously. In terms of resources, none of us would ever say that if we had a magic wand, it wouldn't be nice to have a few more staff. But we're a public service. We recognise the climate in which we operate, and we work for an organisation which prioritises putting resource into frontline delivery. So I think we're confident that the resource we have is enough for us to respond and put in place improvements in relation to the proposals that come through.
Thank you for that. I know Councillor Smith has a question, but this might be a follow-up anyway. Mrs. Harry?
I just really wanted to add as well that obviously as a committee member of this committee, you have the opportunity, if we bring back our response to proposals for improvement or recommendations, whatever they are, if you don't consider that it's sufficient in terms of the actions that we propose to take, then clearly as an audit committee that you can challenge those decisions and ask for further action to be taken. So you do have that within your remit. Okay.
Thanks for that. So, Councillor Smith, did you have a...
Matthew mentioning the Constitution, it reminded me of something that was somewhere in this volume here. Our Constitution, there's reference there to decisions being made by Cabinet and full Council and various committees. I can't remember the exact wording, but there is no reference because the committees will be licensing with their power and planning, but there is no mention in that document that I could see, that phrasing, of single member decisions. I could look it up on the Constitution myself, but it's just reminded me that it was something that I thought, this is something that is done regularly. Single member decisions are taken, which are, that's fine. But in our Constitution, that particular paragraph, there was no reference to that other than decisions made by Council Committee, whatever. So if somebody could just check that we've got an adequate Constitution.
Well, the answer is yes. I don't think our Constitution would be faring very well if it didn't. But I think the point you draw is one. I think it's not explicitly referenced in the wording you refer to. I think it's probably, I think it's implied from that wording that does cover individual cabinet decisions as well as wider decisions.
In the context of this is the Wales Audit Office work on and proposals for improvement, because that's what the paper is about. So if I was just to ask the Welsh Audit Office people whether at some stage in their deliberations they've considered single member decisions.
I think this varies across Wales, to be honest, in terms of the detail and how many councils have delegated decisions to single cabinet members, and it depends on what those decisions are as to how they are then included in the Constitution. So if you do, then you would need to reference that which cabinet members are taking which level of decisions. So there's no clear answer in terms of that, but if a cabinet member is taking a specific decision or has responsibility for specific decisions, you would expect some reference as to how that might happen.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or observations on the annual improvement report? Well, if not, I'll say that we've noted and considered the report. So thank you very much, everyone. Next item on the agenda is the forward work programme. I don't know if anyone's got any observations or questions about that.
Just a quick one. You did
Yes.
refer to a comment you made earlier about the next meeting being rather weighty. And looking at that, it's 2 items on there.
No, it's more than 2, because if you... no, actually, it is only 2. So I guess we'll be filling that up between now and the next meeting, won't we? We've already committed ourselves to a number of things here today. Yep. Okay, well then I'll just note the date and time of the next meeting as the 12th of October at 2 p.m. And I think that's going to be a little bit shorter in terms of interval than we're used to, so you may want to just be aware of that date. Okay, everybody, thanks very much. Thank you.